Lander? Comptroller Lander.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. This is John Avalon, Chairman of Citizens Union. How are you?
Great to see you, John. Thank you.
Thanks for making the time. We appreciate it. We have a esteemed group of our board members and members of the local candidates committee. Thank you for taking the time. This is being recorded. And as you know, Citizens Union has been fighting for reform in New York for well over a century, and our core focus is fair and open elections, honest, accountable government, and ensuring an educated and informed public. And so thank you for taking the time. We do take this process very seriously, and we know you do as well. I want to kick things off by focusing on the reform agenda. That is core to our heart. You have a great record, particularly in the city council, and advancing ranked choice voting, one of the reforms that has gone forward this year. We may very well have on the ballot even your elections, which you support, and open primaries, which is a priority for our organization, which according to your questionnaire, you do not support. I wonder if you just tell us off the top, and try to keep these answers 2-3 minutes if you could, why you're the best candidate to represent a reform agenda in the mayor's office.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you, Citizens Union, for that 100 years of fighting for reform in a city which needed it 100 years ago and urgently needs it now. I mean, we've made progress, but boy, there's still a lot of room to go. I'm excited to be here to talk to you about my plans for good government and a government that works and delivers for New Yorkers. New Yorkers are fed up with a government that is corrupt and that hasn't delivered on their core needs to have housing that's affordable, neighborhoods that feel safe, and a city government that you can trust. And that's what I have been working on my whole career in office. Of all the candidates in the race, I have been fighting for reform across my entire tenure in the city council. I authored the Independent Expenditure Disclosure Act, giving us the strongest law in the country for a super PAC disclosure, which, boy, we need right now, and I'm sure glad we have it. I also led the effort for city council rules reform. I was the rules committee chair in 2014 when we made dramatic reforms to member items, banned outside income, and really took dramatic steps forward. And that's just not easy to do in a legislative body. Like, you gotta, be willing to take some blows to do that. But I did. As controller, I've provided unprecedented transparency. I'm the first controller to have lobbying disclosure and just disclose my meetings and all the meetings of my senior staff, to disclose the city's pension funds investments, which should not have been hard, but it wasn't done before I did it. You can go look them up today. We disclose our asset managers, and we've put up transparent dashboards on government procurement, on agency staffing, employer violations, homelessness, Department of Corrections. We even have an incredible FOIL record. Like, we take transparency and good government seriously in the controller's office. That's the job of the controller's office, so you ought to be able to expect it. But I really feel proud of what we've done and of the difference it made. A bunch of the audits we've done, we've put out clear information and then won real changes. I showed that the ferry system was hiding $250 million. It got reformed, and it's working now. I blocked several corrupt emergency procurements, put out a plan for how to reform emergency procurements. I identified waste and fraud at NYCHA, and then developed a really innovative Yelp for NYCHA repairs that I'll implement as mayor that will transform how NYCHA does contracting for work-in tenants apartments. I really believe what's necessary is to restore honest and effective leadership to City Hall in order to deliver a safer, more affordable, and better run city. And I'm really grateful for your time today to talk about the track record I have doing it in the past and my plans for doing it as mayor.
Thank you very much. David?
Yeah, so I hope you're well, Controller Lander. So City Hall has seen a surge in investigations, indictments, resignations related to ethical misconduct, levels not seen for many a decade. In your view, what is the biggest weakness in city government that has allowed that to happen? And what specific policies would you implement to combat corruption and ensure that your administration remains ethical and transparent?
Yeah. I mean, this is such a good question, and I'm going to get to, because I think I'm the only candidate in the race, or one of the only ones, with a detailed plan on how to combat corruption. And at the top of it, it includes making COIB, the Conflicts of Interest Board, more independent. If you've got a mayoral majority on the Conflicts of Interest Board, you got a conflict of interest to begin with. So there are policies. Lobbying disclosure is critical. Genuine independence of the Conflicts of Interest Board is critical. And I'm glad to go through a few others. But of course, it just matters enormously whether the mayor, I mean, we elect one person to appoint all these commissioners and the deputy mayors and send a signal. And unfortunately, we elected a mayor, and there was evidence from his history, who surrounded himself with some really good people, but just too many people that were kind of in it for themselves. So that is step one. I mean, we have to have a mayor who believes doggedly in hiring the best talent from all, people from New York City for sure, but cast a wide net and just make clear, here's what's going to be expected in terms of transparency. Here's how you're going to report outcomes to me. You are going to report your lobbyist meetings, and set a tone from the top. Now, there also, I will say that procurement in particular is an area of real weakness. And that is where a lot of the corruption in this administration has been. Not all of it, obviously. Overtime at the NYPD was weaponized, was turned into a source of corruption. But if I have to pick one area, it is procurement, where they abused emergency contracting, especially to do an end run around what are supposed to be competitive bidding rules with real integrity processes. That's why I revoked their emergency procurement for asylum seekers and some of the work at Department of Correction, and then have laid out a real specific agenda for reform in procurement. Look, you obviously need to do emergency procurement sometimes, but even then, there are bidding procedures, there are integrity procedures. So I got a real detailed plan on that. So, leadership that's committed to it, independent COIB, and procurement reform, I guess I would say, are the top three things.
Great, thank you.
Juanita?
Sure. Hi, Comptroller. Great to see you. City agencies are really huge with a lot of different departments, work models. You have outside stakeholders like unions that are your partners in government that are not often easy to change and work with for change. You do have a really ambitious agenda that includes many reforms, platforms, including police accountability reform. I'd just love to hear your strategy for how you move your policy agenda forward. How do you really bring about those changes that you've outlined?
Yeah. One of the first things I've said about policing was that I would like to keep Jessie Tisch as police commissioner. And I actually think she's showing how you can bring accountability even as you strengthen and improve a system. I mean, crime has declined every month since she's been commissioner, but last month was the first time the NYPD did not dismiss any of the CCRB recommendations for discipline. So, it is possible with really dogged and focused leadership that's committed to it to move forward on reform, even in ways that are supporting the agency. I mean, if you ask officers, and I do, they feel much better about the leadership that she is providing, even as she's made them stop doing chases, the car chases that were causing problems, even as she has supported CCRB recommendations. It's a leadership style that's bold, that everyone wants accountability in New York. People want accountability from people who commit crimes and harm their neighbors. They want accountability from officers who use excessive force. They want accountability from top brass who abuse their positions in sexual harassment and overtime. And they want accountability from the mayor on spending billions of dollars. And if you set that tone, you can make ambitious change. I'll give you just maybe one more example. I mentioned this Yelp for NYCHA repairs. That comes from a big reform I made internally. I wanted us to have a NYCHA resident audit committee. So when we're focused on public housing, we were guided by what residents wanted. And so my auditors at first said, oh, we can't do that. But I was like, yeah, you're still going to do the audit independently and objectively, but they're going to give us feedback where to look. And they instructed us to look at the repair vendors that come into their homes. They said half the time the work doesn't get done. Sure enough, 44% of the invoices that we looked at had no backup documentation. So we have no idea if the work was done. But then they said, okay, what are you going to do? Don't just propose some new layer of bureaucracy on top of an already broken bureaucracy. And one woman got out her phone and she said, how come it is I can give a rating on an Uber driver, or I could give a Yelp review to a restaurant, and NYCHA can't figure out how to have vendor scorecards on the work in my unit? So we designed this Yelp for NYCHA repairs. And when I'm mayor, before a vendor gets paid for any work in a tenant's apartment, tenant will get a text or an email and rate the vendor on a simple app. And then we'll have vendor scorecards and can hire the folks that do the work and stop hiring the ones that don't. I think there is a hunger for accountability and government efficiency. And this is a moment to have a mayor that brings it.
Lolita, you want to ask her a question?
Yes. Hello, Comptroller Lander. How are you doing today?
Great to see.
So city government has suffered from many staffing problems recently, at least particularly for a number of years, and many highly skilled officials and policy experts who had a lot of experience have left the current administration. So what would you specifically do? You talked a little bit about this before, but would love to hear a little bit more to hire and retain quality public servants.
Yeah. This is so important. I'm really grateful. I don't think we've been asked this question once on the campaign trail, and we've been asked 1,000 questions. You know, there's 300,000 people that are New York City, and in technology and in health and in leadership and in teaching and in policing, all these things. We need it, and we don't have the system set up to recruit and retain the talent that we need well. So I put out a plan called World-Class NYC Workforce. It builds on a thing I did in the controller's office. We created an agency staffing dashboard that didn't exist before. And you can go on our website and see the history and current budgeted headcount and actual headcount at every city agency. So you see what the vacancy rate is. And then each quarter we tie that to performance. And so we're seeing where are the places like food stamps or getting people into housing where the gaps are big. So there's a certain amount of trying to get OMB to go back to being the Office of Management and Budget. Right now, OMB just only lets people do 1 for 2 replacement, even if you've got a place where you're now taking 8 months to get people into affordable housing that used to take 2 months. So that's one piece. But for real top tier talent, like we need in the controller's office for managing the pension funds, we have to look at some civil service reform. Technology is a great example here. Like the tests were written long before technology was what it is today. And we shouldn't need a test there. There's all these credentials that come from schools and from the firms themselves, the tech companies themselves. So I've proposed to do a big blue ribbon commission so that we can modernize our hiring system and get the kind of people in that we need, not being stuck. Now that will be challenging and some of the unions will fight it. I don't have the support of too many of the public sector unions, so I'm not going to owe them anything here. And I want to work with them. I mean, you have to work with them on it, but this is going to take a real push. And then I have some exciting retention ideas as well. One of my favorite proposals is this thing called Homes for City Workers, which would be a pension fund program that would invest alongside a teacher or copper firefighter to double the value of a home they could afford in New York City. So if that teacher could get a $400,000 mortgage, but there's no $400,000 home, pension fund would invest alongside them, buy an $800,000 home after appraisal, of course, and all the due diligence. And then when you sell it, the family would get half the money, the pension funds get the other half back, so they are still earning money. And we could make public service. It's something we hold accountable, we modernize, but also we really show value so we can retain people as well for the long term.
Eleanor?
Hello, Comptroller. How are you?
Great to see you, Eleanor.
Nice to see you. So, sort of the elephant in the room here is, for a lot of us, is the Trump administration. So, if you're elected, how would you deal with Trump and Washington, and especially areas like immigration, law enforcement, Medicaid? You may have other issues, but they have a heavy hand these days. How would you deal with it as mayor?
Look, I think it is important to stand up and fight for New York values. You know, I did that when Elon Musk stole $80 million from New York City. It was my office, should have been Department of Finance or City Hall that found it and called it out. But, you know, we had a whistleblower that didn't trust City Hall. We found out, we rang the alarm bell. I got the governor involved and to, you know, say she'll give me the authority to sue if the law department didn't get into court. Law department got into court, we're going to get that money back. Like, you have to stand up and fight on congestion pricing. I worked hard to help bring the lawsuits that got it off pause so it could be implemented before Trump got into office. You know, of course, there's lots of areas where city agencies work together with federal partners, and that will continue. But I don't believe, look, Eric Adams is running an experiment in how much you could capitulate and humiliate yourself. And it's not doing one thing for New York City. We're not getting better treatment. If anything, we're getting worse treatment, the demand to put ICE at Rikers. So my agencies will work with the federal agencies, you know, professionally and productively. And I'll be professional and productive. But I'm also want us in court when they cut funds that we're owed legally. I want to be proactive and say, you can't take away our transit money because you don't like our
Well, what would you do? What
policy.
would you do if the White House told you that they wanted ICE in Rikers? What would you do if you were mayor?
Yeah, I mean, the laws, I mean, I believe in our sanctuary city laws, and I would make very clear where someone has been convicted of a serious or violent offense, our laws not just allow for, but, you know, require our cooperation on that person's deportation. And I will make sure my Department of Correction and NYPD cooperates. But we are not going to have ICE running around Rikers in an office when they've shown they don't value due process and are looking to deport people to a torture prison. We are going to have our due process where we, you know, have people have their trials. If they're convicted of serious and violent offense, then we'll turn them over, but not in our hospitals, not in our schools, not in our shelters, not in our police precincts. So people could report domestic violence or report that they were a witness to a crime on all those things. You know, the statue's in the harbor for a reason, on immigration especially. I am not going to collaborate with this administration.
Thank you.
Alan, you want to go?
It's me then. Yeah, so I don't have to tell you that there've been some conflicts between the mayor and the city council over the last few years. Do you believe the current balance of power between the mayor and the council is appropriate? And if not, how would you adjust it? And part two of the question is, if elected, how will you build a constructive relationship with the council and the next speaker?
Yeah. You know, I will be a strong mayor in this strong mayor system, but there is room for a much better relationship with the council. And I'll set the tone immediately. I will find a framework for advice and consent on some key positions. I think it will be important to restoring trust. Look, the mayor needs to pick the police commissioner, the schools chancellor, the budget director, and have the ability to fire them if the mayor isn't happy. The supervision line has to be clear, but there's no reason not to do advice and consent. I am going to choose people who are first-class professionals for those positions, and I'd like New Yorkers to see council members asking them questions to show that we're getting first-class professionals who weren't hired because they're cronies or relatives or politicians. So I do think expanded advice and consent with the right parameters. Can't take too long. Got to be able to make interim appointments. Mayor is making the appointment and mayor can fire the person, but advice and consent would be a good step forward that I think will help the council feel like a partner more than they do, but also help the public see that we take it seriously, who the key leaders are in our city. Second, I mentioned COIB reform. The fact that the Conflicts of Interest Board, which evaluates conflicts of interest for council members and for the mayor and for the controller, has a mayoral majority on the board. It just doesn't make sense. No one should have a majority for the Conflicts of Interest Board. Mayor appoints some folks, council appoints some folks, controller, public advocate, some independent reps. Let them genuinely be an independent conflict of interest board. And third, I think this silly dance where the mayor can quash anything that's going on the charter revision ballot is a mistake. If the mayor wants to appoint a charter revision commission, those proposals should go on to the ballot. But the other processes ought to be able to get there. Right now, so many of the mayoral commissions, I like the current mayoral commission, and I actually think they have proposed some good things, even though I distrusted the process. I think Rich Beery and that team are looking at good things. But we now have almost every year where every mayor appoints a faux charter revision commission just to quash everybody else's. And I think it's cynical and bad for the process.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Good evening, Controller. This is Robert Hallman here. And I wanted to follow up on another vital relationship issue that faces any mayor, and that is the relationship between the governor and the mayor, which, as you well know, can be collaborative or it can be very confrontational.
Yes.
What would be your approach in engaging with the governor to achieve some of your goals? And maybe you could give us a couple specific examples of issues you may suspect you'd encounter substantial issues.
Great. Step one is defeating Andrew Cuomo, because if Andrew Cuomo is the mayor, I guarantee you there will be maybe the worst relationship between mayor and governor in history. And there have been a lot of bad ones. I guess he and de Blasio maybe had the worst one so far. And I don't, you guys, I really, he ran a corrupt governorship. He killed the Moreland Commission. There's so many examples. He will not clean up City Hall. But boy, that relationship with the governor will be outrageously bad and just won't be useful for solving New York's problems. So I gave the example before of an area where I did disagree with the governor on something, but we worked productively, and that was congestion pricing. I had worked hard to help get it, adopted from way back when Mike Bloomberg proposed it. When the governor put it on pause, I convened the coalition of lawyers and advocates that brought the two lawsuits that helped get it off pause. And I had some conversations with her. My team had some conversations with her team. There were complicated politics, but we were able to navigate. So those suits got introduced. They helped get it off pause. We had some public, disagreements. Ultimately, we had a really productive conversation and it got implemented. And I think it's a good example of my style. You can disagree when you have to, but not in ways that make conflict escalate. In this case, we had a conflict or a disagreement. We de-escalated it. And I've done a few other things like that. I got some legislation passed to reform pension fund management so we could invest more in private markets. And I was able to do that really productively, working with her and with the legislature. Obviously, your job is to advocate for the city, and I'm going to push for more fair share of resources on Article 6 and other things. But big steps forward need to be done statewide. I'd love to see big steps forward on childcare, but New York City can't do that alone. So it's going to have to be a statewide effort. That would be such a win for the governor and the legislature and the city to take next steps forward statewide toward more universal childcare. So willing to tolerate conflict, have it productively, and look for opportunities to take big steps together.
Thank you.
John?
Comptroller Lander, I wanted to return to the question of open primaries. This is a long-time priority of our organization. It was put forward as something to further examine by the Charter Revision Commission, as you know. New York actually is an outlier. Most cities in our country have some form of nonpartisan or open primaries. Close partisan primaries are rare, and it leads to things like Mayor Adams being elected last time around by the equivalent of 9% of registered voters in New York. So I wanted you to give you a chance to explain why you oppose opening up the process in a way that we feel would be more fair and representative.
Yeah. And I mean, let me be clear. It's not that I don't think it should be proposed to the voters or put on the ballot. It's an appropriate process for discussion. I have a bunch of friends in California, and I think that model, you know, where you have the primary with all the candidates and then the top 2 candidates go on in the fall is productive. Now, sometimes that could be gamed as well, like with Steve Garvey last year. There's no perfect system, I guess, is what I would say. And boy, you know, given what the Board of Elections is here, and I'm often you know, a critic of the Democratic Party in my home borough in Brooklyn and in New York State. Like, I am definitely not a party operative or a party hack. So I see the challenges, and I'm open to continuing the discussion. I think there's a role for what the idea of a political party is supposed to be, a set of people with some ideas for how government should work. Like, I'm a Democrat, you know, and I want to see our party do better. I want to see us take government efficiency. Like, I like this abundance. You could probably hear it in some of what I'm saying. I've got big, ambitious values. I want more affordable housing and childcare and good jobs, but I want to see us do better at building the housing and delivering, making government work more functionally. So to me, I'm pushing all those things as a Democrat, and I want to see our party get better. And that's politics. You try to build a party that lays out ideas, that offers new leaders. And, you know, I think that's true in New York and nationally. So that's just how I come at things. How do we improve this party locally, at the state level, and nationally? And primaries are a way you do that. You like go debate issues in primaries, put out ideas so your party stands for something and can bring those ideas to the ballot. So that's my inclination. That said, is it working perfectly in New York? It is not working perfectly in New York. And I respect the desire that Citizens Union has to explore other ideas, which I recognize are working in other states. And it's certainly reasonable to propose those here.
Thank you.
John, do you want to actually close us up, because we have?
Yeah, if anybody, I'll jump in for one more if folks haven't answered other questions. Obviously, you are a comptroller. Eleanor indicated, you know, we've got a lot of storm clouds on the horizon with the Trump administration, but I wonder if you consider the underlying fiscal shape of the city rickety, and what you would do as mayor to stave off something like we experienced in 1975.
Yeah, I've been loud about this. You know, we started 1 week after the election identifying the risks, and I think I've done 5 reports on it since then, the most recent 2 weeks ago, because yes, I mean, we're facing both economic risk as a result of tariffs and economic uncertainty. And, you know, the mayor continues to project growing revenues, but we are projecting $2 billion less than we're projecting next year, and $2 billion less after that on a $115 billion budget. Just at the best estimate of where the economy is going. And then you have to add the budget risks as well. Trump's already made a bunch of cuts to programs that the city, in some cases, is going to be very, like, I'll give you one example. They cut an emergency housing voucher program that was issued during the pandemic. 7,700 of those vouchers are here. When that federal funding goes, like, the city's got an impossible bargain. We're either going to pick them up, or people are going to wind up in shelter and we're going to pay even more. What we should be doing is working with those families now. But what I proposed for budget is, 1, increasing the rainy day fund by $1 billion now. We have the tax revenue to do it. I laid out a formula. One thing is, I want to make the rainy day fund funded by a formula, not by discretionary budget action every year, because it never gets funded that way. So I've put the formula out I would use, and I'm absolutely committed to it. When I'm mayor, I'm sure I'm going to want to say, that was a stupid idea. I want to spend that money on new programs, but I've made the commitment, and I'm going to live up to funding the rainy day fund by formula. We should put $1 billion more in it now. And we should add $1 billion to the general reserve now for things like those housing vouchers and other cuts that come up next year. Before Trump's inauguration, the city was in pretty good shape economically. Private sector jobs were back above pre-pandemic levels, starting to see improvements in commercial vacancies. But now, given the tariffs, given the economic uncertainty, and given the budget cuts, we have a very serious set of challenges that the next mayor is going to face.
Thank you. Thank you, Comptroller. Ben?
Comptroller Lander, thank you very much for being with us tonight and for dedicating your time. If you we have room for kind of a minute of a closing statement, if you like, and then we have to close it off.
Great. First, I'll just say thank you again. Like, this is a set of questions that are so critical for the future of the city. And it's not surprising they're not what people are talking about in the course of the campaign, but that's just, you know, not what's being talked about. So if you want someone who has a real demonstrated track record of public integrity, really will wake up every day working to bring honest and effective leadership, and who knows that what New Yorkers want is a safer and more affordable city. In order to get a safer and more affordable city, we have to have a better run city. And that means focusing on that civil service reform and hiring the best people, focusing on procurement and corruption reform, modernizing city processes. It is not the sexiest stuff, but it is the stuff that makes government deliver. I love this city. I want it standing up for our values and fighting Donald Trump. But I also know that it has to do better at living up to its values. And for that, we need real governance reform and somebody who wakes up every day working to deliver a safer, more affordable, and better run city. Really honored for your consideration, and you know, would be very grateful to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Comptroller Lander. Appreciate you.
Thanks very much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.